With the city of Rome set ablaze and the Visigothic warriors moving freely through the heart of Italy, the Western Empire was in a state of desperation. The proud capital of the ancient world that had once ruled over the known lands was being looted and defiled. Emperor Honorius, who had already been ruling under constant threat, saw his authority shatter with this disaster. Though he would manage to cling to power and reassert a form of control, the sack of Rome in the year 410 was a blow from which the empire could not recover. Prestige that had once seemed unshakable was gone, and the illusion of strength had vanished before the eyes of Romans and barbarians alike. For the next 40 years, the empire staggered from crisis to crisis. Uprisings of governors in distant provinces shook its foundations. Succession struggles between ambitious claimants further weakened what little cohesion remained. More disastrous still was the loss of provinces essential to the survival of the empire. North Africa was the most vital of them all, for the grain of Carthage had for centuries fed the city of Rome and its armies. With each year the difficulties mounted until the burden on the state became unbearable. Honorius himself had been dealt a mortal wound in terms of reputation after the sack. The Gothic king Alaric and his warriors left the city only when they chose to, not because the emperor or his generals had forced them out. Honorius by then had withdrawn to the safety of Ravenna. The choice of Ravenna as imperial residence reflected the desperate position of the empire, since it was more defensible, but also revealed how far the emperor had retreated from the heart of Italy. Rome's armies were too few and too scattered to protect both the capital and the provinces. As Honorius clung to power, new threats arose. In Gaul, a usurper appeared. Constantine III, who had risen in Britain, sensed the weakness of the emperor after Alaric's march and established himself as a rival ruler. By the year 411, the matter had to be settled, and Honorius entrusted the task to his new general Constantius. A capable man and loyal to the emperor, Constantius moved against Constantine and compelled his surrender. Promises of safe passage meant little in those days, and Constantine together with his son were executed. Their severed heads were sent to Ravenna as proof of restored authority. For a brief moment Honorius seemed secure again, yet the empire could not enjoy peace for long. Soon another rebellion broke out, this time in North Africa. In 412 Heraclius, the governor of the African provinces, raised his standard against Rome. He had felt overlooked when Constantius became the most important general of the West, and Honorius' reputation in ruins offered an opening. Controlling Carthage and its grain, he cut shipments to Italy just as the Vandals would later do. He prepared a fleet to invade, and in 413 landed near Rome. Although our sources are vague, it seems his army was defeated by larger imperial forces. He fled back to Africa, where he was soon murdered at Carthage. Though the revolt was crushed swiftly, it revealed how governors now acted with near independence. Provinces that had once obeyed Rome without question now followed their own paths. This was not limited to Africa. In Hispania and Britain, Roman authority had long been fading. In Hispania, the Vandals pressed hard against Roman positions, and after the Battle of Tarraco forced Rome from most of the region. Barbarian kings now ruled where governors once administered. The empire's weakness became further clear when in 418 Honorius granted the Visigoths land in Aquitaine. This was no mere alliance. It allowed a foreign and hostile people to settle permanently within the empire and to form the basis of a kingdom. Only 2 centuries earlier, legions had fought far from Italy to keep such tribes beyond the Rhine and the Danube. Now they were permitted to hold territory in Gaul itself. It would be unfair to place all blame on Honorius, for he had little choice. The empire could not defend all fronts. These settlements were born of necessity, yet they sped up the decline. They also provided the model by which future barbarian kingdoms would be carved from the corpse of the empire. Even with these generous terms, the Visigoths were restless. In 425, their new king Theodoric I pushed out from Aquitaine to besiege Arles. This time the Roman general Aetius successfully defended the city and forced them to accept peace. The episode showed again that no concession could truly pacify them. Meanwhile, events in the east played their part. Theodosius, the second nephew of Honorius, became sole emperor of the Eastern Empire after his father Arcadius died in 408. He was a child at the time, and so power fell into the hands of court officials. Under their guidance, he pursued peace with the Huns, who were rising as a new and deadly threat. But peace came at a steep price of gold payments and did little to stop the Huns from raiding even the suburbs of Constantinople. Theodosius' reign did see a major achievement, however, in the creation of the Theodosian Code. This collection of laws stretching back over a century gathered and organized the decrees of emperors and senates. It enshrined Nicene Christianity as orthodoxy while sidelining Arianism and other rivals. Though it did not halt the military decline, it provided a lasting legacy for law in both the Roman world and medieval Europe.
Honorius died in 423 living KO 11 morts.
A usurper named Jonas tried to take power but was crushed by the Eastern armies. The new Western emperor was Valentinian, the third son of Constantius, and supported by Theodosius. As a child, Valentinian could not rule, and so his mother Galla Placidia directed the state. For a time she and her advisors attempted to restore defenses and reorganize what remained of the empire. But resources were meager and threats grew. The greatest of these came in 429 when the Vandals under King Gaiseric left Hispania and crossed into Africa. With their Alan allies they advanced eastward, burning towns and conquering fortresses. Africa had long been the jewel of the empire, rich, fertile, and stable. Few troops were stationed there, for little threat had existed before. Now Rome faced the unthinkable prospect of losing the region that fed it. Governor Bonifacius tried to resist, but his forces were too weak. The Vandals pressed on and in 430 besieged Hippo Regius for more than a year. When supplies ran short they withdrew, but only temporarily. Bonifacius himself returned to Italy, but soon clashed with the ambitious general Aetius. The two met in battle near Ravenna, where Bonifacius was fatally wounded. Thus, while Africa burned, Rome's generals fought one another for power. The empire could not hope to endure such division. By 435 peace was made with the Vandals, granting them much of what they had seized. As with the Goths, Rome tried to save itself by ceding land. But in 439, the Vandals struck again, capturing Carthage itself. This was a catastrophe beyond measure. The city had been the granary of Rome and now served a new master. The loss crippled the finances of the state. Taxes on the remaining provinces rose higher and higher, fueling unrest among citizens who saw no return for their sacrifices. The Vandals did not stop there. They launched raids across the Mediterranean, striking Sicily and threatening Italy itself. Only in 442 was a more permanent peace concluded, and it was entirely in their favor. By then Rome's decline was plain to all. The empire was too weak militarily to defend its lands, and instead bargained away territory to those it once called enemies. North Africa, once the richest province of the empire, was gone. Grain shipments that had sustained Rome for centuries were cut off. Without this wealth, the state could not fund armies nor pay officials. As revenues dwindled, taxes were increased on exhausted populations, who now questioned the very worth of imperial rule. Thus the empire entered a vicious cycle. Less land meant fewer resources. Higher taxes meant more discontent. Discontent meant revolts and weakness, which in turn meant more losses to barbarians. And in the shadows, a new terror prepared to strike. Around 440 the Huns under Attila rose to prominence, threatening both East and West. Though the Western Empire would limp along for another 3 decades, the foundations had already crumbled. The sack of Rome, the usurpations, the rebellions in Africa, the rise of barbarian kingdoms within its borders, the fall of Carthage, and the crushing burden of taxes had prepared the way. Blow after blow fell upon the once mighty empire. Each nail was hammered deeper into its coffin until only the final collapse remained.